Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I am here with Jules Hay. She's the Participation and Inclusion Manager of Rugby in Australia. Background of over 20 years working with education, sports sectors in roles such as Director of Sport, Head of Physical Education, Lecturer Participation, I will go on, but I'll stop there because she's just an amazing advocate for women in coaching and all things to do with gender equality. Jules Hay, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, thanks. And it's so good to see you, Emma. It's been so long as one of my coaching mentors. So it's great to catch up officially and have a chat. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, fantastic. Well, listen, I'm going to kick it off with one of our pattern break questions. And that is, what do you like to have for breakfast on a Sunday morning?
That's a tough one. Usually my weekend go-to is poached eggs on toast with a side of bacon and mushrooms.
Ooh.
From the cafe, because I quite like to have the little, the atmosphere and going to my local cafe and support local business and then have the nice coffee too, which we were just talking about how good our coffee is here in Melbourne.
Correct. And I love you. You are all about community. It's in your title, inclusion manager. So let's talk about community sport. Let's talk about what does it mean to be an inclusion manager?
Yeah, sure. So I think part of the reason I was attracted to this role was because I've always grown up. Mum always says I grew up in Perth on the west side of Australia in a court, which is, for those in America, is, I guess, do you call it a court over there? Something Perth called it a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, a cul-de-sac.
Cul-de-sac,
that works.
Yeah. So, and I used to round up all the kids in the street and organise them into something, whatever that was. I remember growing up with a billy cart. I remember marbles. I remember cricket. So I guess from a really young age, I was really heavily embedded in my community. People always give me a lot of sort of stick about the fact that I don't know TV shows or songs. And I think that was because I grew up outside in the street, in the park, at the local swimming pool. And I think that just really became a part of me. And I loved that. So when I had my own children, I really wanted to bring them on a bit of that journey too. I'm really lucky here in Melbourne. We've got so much community sport. We're spoilt for choice. So they've been a part of the basketball, surf club, netball, footy, Aussie rules footy. They did soccer for a bit. So, it's a really nice, I think, way to get to know your community, know the people. And then after the lockdowns, I went back and worked in a school, which was great. Another great way to get to know my community. And I thought, it was during that time that I thought, I just love sport. I want to take the step and work in sport. And this job came up and I was like, well, sounds pretty awesome thing to do all day, to work with a community and try to build, as I say, for me, it's about building great clubs. And we know that if the club is great, then people will come almost no matter what the sport is, because it brings the local community in. They might be driving past or walking the dog and they're like, hey, what's going on there? Oh, there's a barbecue. Oh, I'm going to grab a sausage from the canteen and watch whatever sport's on the field. So, I think we're blessed here in Melbourne if you go for a walk on a Saturday or a Sunday or even a weeknight around your local community, you'll see some form of sport being played. And that for me it's that the sense of belonging and connecting with our community. And I think, like I say, to be able to do that for a job is a real privilege.
So if you were to do a health check on building a great club, you go into a club, what sort of are the pillars that make up a great club?
Oh, good question. I think for me, it's always about your very first experience of the club. So quite often now, that very first experience is actually online, because you might be Googling, what is in my local area. So it's first interaction with the club is jumping usually on their website and having a look. And if you see people like you on the website, then usually you're going to be like, oh, that looks like an interesting place to go, I might go down. And then I think that next really important step, the very first experience of the face-to-face meeting at the club. So making sure that someone's there to meet you, greet you, make you feel welcome. Usually, I know in particular, a lot of girls and women are perhaps a little bit nervous about heading down to a club, especially if they don't know anyone. So if they know when I get there, someone's going to make me feel welcome, explain to me what to do. And recently, actually, I had a really great experience at a rugby club where I was new to playing rugby, and one of the women in the team just was like, "Jules, come with me," and then she sort of buddied up with me the whole training session. And I thought, to me, that was like the real sort of penny dropping moment of, if we have someone, and I think whether you're man, woman, boy or girl, if there's one person that sort of takes you under their wing the very first time you go down and helps to explain the drill or helps go over here and do this, that to me it just made it a really awesome experience. And I think that was the key, is just having that one person that, you know, wraps their arms around you and says, "Hey, welcome to the club and here's what you're doing." And so you feel safe to ask them some of the things that you don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And of course, some of our listeners are in the business world, and everything you just said then is equally as important in terms of what makes a great business. I work a lot in manufacturing these days, and when you walk into a shop or when you experience that first moment for someone to take you under their wing, and I love this whole thing about belonging. If I can see someone who looks like me, so why is that important, especially for one of your passion areas and my passion areas around women and girls in sport and in coaching? So why is it important for visibility?
If I talk to my lived experience, having been an athlete, coach, on the committee, referee, etc., is that the most powerful thing to go into a club or a sport or a business is to feel like, first of all, self-worth, like you're visible and you're seen. And then I think secondly, that your voice is heard. So no matter whether that's for something small, like good morning when you first walk into the office, or, you know, if you first come to the training or to the game, people say hello to you, through to being able to ask questions about how do I do this, through to then having safe conversations on a deeper level about perhaps calling something out or seeking clarification. So if we're able to do that, then, and I guess that is much easier to do initially with people who look like us, sound like us, hear our voice, then we're feeling more encouraged and more supported from the very start.
Thank you for sharing those really important messages so far of how we can all do a better job. Because certainly, correct me if I'm wrong, when I think about rugby or even AFL, AFLW to some degree, there might be a little bit of stigma out there that it's just a sports for boys. So what's your comment to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working on behind the scenes at Rugby at the moment is this Mythbusters. So we really want to come up with sort of some statements around Mythbusters. And we know that in our community in Australia, those contact sports like AFL and rugby, there's a bit of a myth that they're not really suitable for girls and for women. And we know that in actual fact, I actually, a couple of years ago, I was coaching under 10 girls, footy, AFL footy. And when I went around the circle and said to them after the very first game, what's your favourite thing? What do you love about this sport? It was like 9 in 10 of them said the tackling. So we know that little girls just love the physicality. They love to grab someone and pull them down to the ground, whether that's footy or rugby. And so I think that, you know, first it gives them confidence. Like, why not is the question, you know, and we know that, you know, that if women are feeling and girls are feeling confident in their selves, that just has a whole pile of other knock-on effects in their life. So I think trying to break down the stigma around the contact is super important. And the other thing is that I will just say as a coach, for those who might be thinking, oh, I don't think I could do that because it's, I don't play a contact sport and I don't want to jump straight into getting tackled, is that good coaches are able to scaffold it. So you don't come down as a beginner and then just get thrown to the ground. The idea as the coach is that you are able to scaffold the contact. And whether, quite often at whether it's footy or rugby, we might have trainings or drills that are non-contact. And if you're feeling a little bit hesitant as a woman or a girl, then we can start you off with the non-contact version, and then we can slowly increase the contact level. Because I think that's part of the myth too, is that people, they might see the elite level of the game that might be a huge contact between two players and they think, oh, I could never do that. And it's really important that what we advocate for as coaches is that we scaffold the level of contact in our contact sports to the level of our athletes. And so if you are a beginner, certainly come on down and get involved, because the coaches can, ease you in gently to the contact. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that, we're all pretty flexible when we get thrown on the grass, and that it's actually, if you've never been tackled before, it's actually quite a fun thing to do, and you surprise yourself. When I was down at the rugby the other night, I was a little bit hesitant myself. I got taken out. I was like, actually, it's not so bad. And we sort of, I think we probably build up a bit of fear in our own minds. So it's breaking down that fear and saying, oh, that wasn't too bad. And I've got to say, it certainly came in handy. A couple of years ago, I went for a run in the dark and I tripped over on the concrete and I automatically just rolled. And I thought, oh my God, that's all that training I've done, on the footy field, that I'm able to react. So it certainly has some transferable skills into our life then, if we do have a trip or a spill that we're used to, because I think that's it too, as a woman, or once we step away from sport, we don't have that contact. And so we form a bit of a safety net around ourselves. So it's pushing our own barriers back to feel confident to hit the ground on the grass and say, actually, that was pretty fun and I enjoyed that.
Well, you heard it, everybody. Let's all stretch our comfort zone, and it's same in martial and martial arts as well, isn't it? But I want to pick up on the word scaffolding, because it's not something I hear a lot, but I love it because I use it a lot in progress, regress, but also, especially in the business world, it's about meeting people where they're at. Is something that I really heard there. And I think that's super, super critical for coaches listening. I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes we make assumptions.
Yeah.
What
we
are some
assumptions, and we have expectations, right?
Yeah. And
I think that's in the workplace and in the coaching context. So we often look at somebody's CV or somebody's, like I coach under 14 boys, and we expect them to be at a certain level. And so sometimes as a manager or as a coach, we can be blinded by that because we just automatically, like you say, assume that they're going to come in with that set of skills or that level of knowledge. And then in actual fact, it takes a little bit of time for us to unpack that and then realise, oh, I set the bar too high. I need to go back, re-scaffold this, and then bring them up on the journey.
One of my favourite.
Actually, Emma,
Yep.
We were talking about the COVID lockdowns, and that's probably one of the things too that's been a real eye-opener for me here in Melbourne, because we were locked up for 2 years, and community sport was banned for 2 years. And I see in our children that the fundamental movement skills, there is a delay in development. And so what we would, pre-COVID, what we would expect our kids to be at, the level of skill, is actually now sort of all messed up, because some kids kept up their one-on-one or their skills during COVID with parents, and others did. The other end of the spectrum is some did nothing. And so all of a sudden now, when we're coaching kids, the differentiation between the kids who are quite strong and mastered skills versus the kids who perhaps didn't do much over the COVID era is huge. And then ties into that with something else you and I were just talking about off camera, is that piece around mental health and confidence. And of course, as an athlete, that has a massive knock-on effect to performance. So for coaches, there's a lot to manage, and probably that does transfer over to the workplace too, that we constantly have to, adjust and say, where is this person at today? When they come to work or when they come to training, how are they today? And that sometimes the expectation has to be put aside, and we have to really work one-on-one with that person to support them in the moment.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, in the moment. I mean, I really think that being present is sometimes a lost art. And as coaches, if we're not present, we're going to miss all the cues and we're going to miss all the signs to be able to meet them where they're at. So just a great reminder, Jules, for us to, before we go out and coach, or leaders and managers listening to this, before you go into a meeting, if you can just take 1 or 2 minutes to gather yourself, to compartmentalize as well sometimes what's going on in our life and our world, put that aside so we can be fully present to pick up on those cues. Otherwise we miss those cues.
I think I'm certainly guilty of this sometimes too, as a manager and as a coach, that we go into those meetings or training session or game with a plan, and then what can happen is, if we're too focused on the plan, like you say, that's when we can miss the cues of the moment. There is a moment where you go, you know what, plan to the side, and we're going to, guys, throw it out. This is what we need right now. This is what the team needs, or this is what the individual needs. And so I really agree with you about, it's important to plan, but of course we have to be, if we're not present, that we're almost blinded by our planning. So we've got to sort of flip that notion of have the plan but be present, which can be really challenging particularly if you're new to managing or to coaching, because you're trying to obviously lean into the plan that you set. And I think probably that the other question is, when do you throw the plan out? So we talk about being present, because that's a risk then, and that's hard, and you've got to back yourself and have the confidence to go, I recognize the plan I had is not going to work at this present moment in time, so now I'm going to take the risk and we're going to change it in the moment. And I think that really is about that self-belief in your own decision making and standing by it. And it doesn't always work. I've certainly tried that before and then it's failed, but I think that's okay, because I think that's part of being a leader, is sometimes when you make take that risk in the moment, it's not always going to pay off. And that becomes a learning opportunity with your group or with your one-on-one, whoever you're working with, to say, yep, look, I changed my mind. We tried to solve the problem like this. It didn't work. I acknowledge that. And then let's talk about next time we're faced with that, how can we make it better for everyone to get a better outcome?
Let's say you've put an improvement plan in place for someone that you're coaching or mentoring, and they're not improving at a rate that you would, to hit their KPIs or at a level that your club is all about. What's your advice on sort of performance management?
Yeah, I don't think you have to stay locked in, I think we get so caught up in this is the plan or this is the thing and let's follow through all the way to the end. Like you and I, it sort of comes back to what we were talking about prior to we started filming about. You said to me, Jules, you've sort of pivoted a lot in your career. And I think, yeah, on the one side I have, and there's certainly a bit in my mind where I go, geez, I have pivoted a lot. But at the same time, by doing that, I've learnt a lot. I've worked with so many different types of people and organisations. So I think when we recognise that perhaps this was the plan or these were the KPIs we set, and now the environment's changed or the person's changed, let's not be afraid to change that and update that, because COVID's probably a perfect example where 2019, we had every organisation and business and sport had all these plans set up. No one could have forecast what was ahead of us. And what happened was people who innovated and changed it in the moment were able to really leverage off some of the great things about, it was a horrific time, and we spoke about that too, but there were some brilliant things that came out of that. Like our ability to quickly pivot onto online and to learn and to, like I say, innovate incredible. So it is, I think it comes back to, if you recognize that, then don't be afraid to change it and say, hey, this isn't working. Let's rejig it or move in a different direction, and let's review constantly to make sure that it's right for you and it's right for the business or the organisation or the team, because of those shifting things. And we know we're living in an era where change is happening faster than ever.
Totally concur with what you just said. So how do you help someone see their blind spots?
I think through working together. Like I would say, I guess that's the teacher in me, is the piece around education. But to go back a step, they probably have to be ready for that. I think that's probably the critical thing. If you identify that an athlete you work with or a colleague perhaps has some blind spots, you know, I'm quite a direct communicator, as you've probably picked up. And in the past, I've tried the direct communication and it ends up in quite a defensive battle. So I think sometimes there's a time and a place to say, what is the best approach if I'm the manager or the coach of the team? What's the personality of the person like? Are they going to be receptive to the feedback or have the right mindset? And then it's picking the right time and the right style of delivering that feedback to get the behaviour change that you want. And I think I'm certainly guilty of not getting those things right, and then it all goes pear-shaped. And it's, you know, it's through experience of making the mistake that you go, geez, yeah, that didn't really work. I didn't really get the desired behavioural change I was hoping for. It's a complicated question to answer when we talk about how do we get people to identify those blind spots and work with you. I think sometimes too, it's about not singling out people perhaps and looking at it more broadly from a team perspective and trying to bring the team on the journey, you know, and say, okay, this is something that we could all be better at. And also like talking from your own lived experience of how you have made mistakes and how you can also grow and learn. And then I think that helps to bring people on the journey. So it's less about, I think you have these blind spots and this is how I want you to change. And it's more about the we. Like if we do this together, this is how we're going to be able to tackle the issue, or we're going to be able to be a better team. And that, I think, people are less combative than the you know, sort of thing.
Totally. And big shout out to our golf pennant team, the Turtles, the Northern Golf Division 3 women's pennant team that I had the honour of being a part of. We were Every Turtle Matters, which stood for enthusiasm, teamwork and mental toughness. And we were all about we. Everything was we behaviours, we language. So it was an honour to be a part of that team, and some amazing things transformed in the 2024 season. So nothing makes me happier than talking about Turtles.
Emma, yeah, it's a really good point, actually. It's one of my philosophies as a junior coach actually even as a senior coach, is why I give every player equal playing time. Because in a team sport, you're only as good as everybody functioning together as a team. So a lot of coaches will play their best players more time on the field. But the irony of that is you're making the gap bigger between your strongest players and your players that require more development. So a big philosophy of mine, and I actually just was explaining to my boys on the weekend when we had a great win, is that everybody is getting equal playing time, because the biggest growth at the moment in our team is the boys who needed more development, because they're getting out there and they're playing. And if those boys are getting more development and more playing time, overall, our team is much stronger. That if we all help develop together, we're going to be so much stronger.
Yeah. So what does creating a positive learning environment look like, sound like, and feel like?
Yep. So look like, I would say, happy people to begin with, happy people that interact with each other. And I think they feel safe to voice their opinion, you know, and that we feel safe to call out when we don't agree with someone, or that we are able to give feedback in the moment, and people, like I just said, was talking about before, people are not getting defensive about it, that it's delivered in a way that's respectful in the workplace, professional, and that people feel like, okay, and they're able to be heard. And I think it's connection. Like, if we can, which is really hard to get, especially in the workplace. I think in a funny sort of way, it's probably much easier in a sport environment because there's one strong commonality of you're all there for the sport. And in particular, if you work in a team sport, then like I coach under 14 boys footy, I've got a whole group of 14-year-old boys. So they're sort of all at the same similar stages of development. They like the same things. It's much easier. In the workplace, it's really challenging because you've got a variety of ages, lived experiences, different cultural backgrounds, so many intersectionalities coming in, that it can be really challenging to get that right. And I haven't always got it right as a team leader. It's really, and I think it is about just listening, continuing to try, supporting each other, admitting when you make a mistake, and persisting through that. Like the word resilience, I heard you say earlier, that there is an element of that in the workplace because it's a lot more challenging to get it right.
I ran a corporate day last week with a construction company called Lennar, and in the morning we focused on themes like resiliency and communication, and then in the afternoon we embedded that in sport, like a learn through play philosophy using the sport of pickleball. And it definitely there was 4 different generations within that company, but all of a sudden there was only 2 out of 41 people who had played pickleball before. So as an example of, through sport, we were still able to bring everyone together because everyone's playing background was ground zero. So it sort of stripped away the all the again, back to assumptions that we put on people to be able to bring them back for a really awesome environment. So I just want to stay on positive for a minute. I mean, I think the sandwich effect is outdated. So let's take language as an example. Let's go there. What are your thoughts on positive language as it relates to creating these safe and belonging type of environments? What are some tips?
Yeah, I think obviously a big one focus at the moment in sport in particular is the use of non-gendered language. And I think we're moving towards a world where we try to really use that inclusive language more often and creating the safe environment to call it out. So my big philosophy in this, which actually comes from my teaching background, one of our really big philosophies when we educate our physical education teachers, so they're our sport and our health teachers here in Australia, is this approach called the strengths-based approach. And a lot of sports do pick it up as well. And I love this approach because it's about finding what our strengths are as a group or as a team, and then really identifying them and working on them. And because I think too often it's very easy. It's always much easier for people and I think teams and organisations to call out their gaps or their areas for development. It's much harder for individuals to call out their strengths. And so I think that often when I talk to athletes, I say, for example, I have to move them to another position in the game, and I know they may not be very happy with that, especially kids. I'll often use the approach to really talk about their strengths, as in, look, we really need you down the back line. We need some speed down there. We need some attack. We need some, someone who's got a great tackle. You've got a great tackle. And then the child straight away goes, oh, okay. So they sort of came into the mindset into the conversation of, oh, no, I've been moved down back. I've done something wrong. And when you talk them through your rationale as to why you're actually moving them down there, I think they're much more receptive to that. And all of a sudden the confidence is, oh, okay, I haven't done something wrong. She's actually the coach has identified this in me and I'm going over there. And I think that's a really nice one that I try to take into the workplace too, is identifying the strengths. And like we talk about language, is using that what was a great thing that happened in this and how can we build on that, or you're really great at this, because I think people are okay to talk about, like, if we're making it a bit more comfortable, they're quite happy to then open that conversation up about their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And just to clarify with regards to what I was saying about the sandwich effect, I just believe that the more authentic we can be in relation to what you just said, the better. So rather than positive, negative, positive, which was certainly something I learned back in the 80s, I would prefer we go down the path of focusing on the strength and also here's an area that we're going to continue to work on. I love language like areas for development. This is all really great tips for coaches out there, but we just don't need to give a compliment where it's not due as well. So just keep the authenticity is what I mean by just be mindful of the sandwich effect. And instead, one of my favorite 2 words, and you just summarized my TEDx talk, which is the power of next time. So future-based thinking is a really great way to be able to focus on the strengths. And even last week, the one thing that I did well, can I just say, because we're talking about strengths, was just a bunch of Venn diagrams where the teams came up with their top 3 strengths. And then they could see the commonalities of what the different parts of the organization do well and what they can count on each other for, which I think works really well in the sporting realm as well. So just
I really agree with that, Emma. I often tell my team, okay, we know we're really fast at the ball, and we're, for example, we're really good at if it's even a footy context, we're really good at the run 3 handball. So let's use that more. And what we need to work on is the aerial game. So it's really like giving them the positive praise, and then, like you say, phrasing, not in a way of them saying, oh, and you're really crap at that, so it's like, it's putting it positively as well, of we're going to develop this, and throwing the energy behind that, I think, too, is like, I think, because the one thing I always enjoy with talking with you is that we bring a similar level of energy to our coaching. And I think you have to, when you talk about strengths and then when you talk about areas for development, it's also about the energy you put into that conversation and the belief. So going back to the example we just talked about before with the one-on-one with the child or the athlete, when I've moved them to a different position, they're feeling uncomfortable, they think it's a penalty while they're being played, it's really about me bringing the energy to the conversation and saying, hey, I really believe in you and this is why I'm moving you. And I think, because there's that body language and the kid, we all know that I've changed from coaching girls back to boys. The boys aren't listening. Once I speak for 10 seconds, they've totally switched off. But I know, it's funny going back to boys, I know that what I've got to bring is more energy to the boys, because that's what they're picking up on. So if I can say, hey, I really believe in you, let's go out there, do X, Y, Z, this is what you're great at, they're like, oh, okay. And they really feed off that, which is, I think, really important when you're having these conversations.
Fantastic. All right. In 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach?
Well, I have your book here, and I was looking back through, you interviewed me for in the back pages, and I had to remember, because I think, of course, there's a lot of great things that make a great coach. There's a lot of things that make a great coach, but for me personally, I think the best coaches I've ever had, really clear communicators, and then also the relationships. And I think for me, one of the really powerful things about the relationship as a coach, whether you're a coach in the workplace or in the sport context, is those relationships that go beyond the immediate time you work with the athlete or the colleague. So the relationships that go, years and years beyond, athletes contacting me back and saying, hey, Jules, I've done X, Y, Z, and sharing their celebration with me. That to me is the power of coaching, and being able to work and mentor other people, is when I hear their success stories many years sometimes down the track from when I've worked from them. And that's the bit that really empowers me, and why I love being, a manager or a coach, is just the connection that we once had has triggered something in that person to then keep on going on and keep on and passing it on to the next person, which I think is just an amazing, it's an amazing journey to be a part of.
Well, I mean, I'm just so honoured to have played a small part in your journey all those years ago. But just as an example, we caught up with each other in January, and you've never seen such a big hug. We we saw each other. I was like, oh my God, so great to see you. And yeah, you know, I also appreciate what you said off air, even though I'm not in the sporting world as much anymore. Just the impact that we can have, the flow on effect of you know, what it really means to be a coach. We never quite know, but it is one of the greatest honors in the world. Whether you're a leader, whether you're a manager, people will always remember how you made them feel. So
yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And
yeah.
the really interesting thing across my years as a teacher, a coach, and a manager, the really strong relationships that you have, the ones you sort of know, and then obviously you keep in contact with things, it's the kids or the people that you didn't know you had an effect on. And I found it really interesting when I've either left a school or left a workplace or left a team. A child, often it's been a child because I've worked more in that space, but a child will reach out with a card and some really meaningful words, and I will be like, wow, I didn't even know I had that impact on that person. And I think they're the really big, you know, moments you go, wow, like I generally didn't realize, I didn't think I didn't have much cut through with that person or much influence. And I think they're the moments that, yeah, I have a box, I put them all in, and I sometimes, you know, open that up and read back through them and go, wow, I remember that moment where I didn't think I had an impact on that child, and look at the letter I got from them at the end of the time I worked with them. That's incredible. So yeah, I think there's that good I think it's the TEDx talk with the lollipop moment. And I think in that TEDx talk, the lecturer talks about he gave someone a lollipop and the girl remembered. And I think that's it. I think one of the most powerful things is that we don't realise the impact we have on others. And so, you know, like when we go into as a coach or a leader, that it is important, even when sometimes we might feel frustrated or tired or exhausted or burnt out, that we are making an impact on these people's lives. And don't underestimate that, because the power of your energy and your words, you know, it really can change lives.
And note, coaches, I love that I call it a confidence trigger list, but, you know, a confidence box, so that when your threshold is challenged, which it will be continuously as a leader, manager, and coach, that you pull out that box and you reread the impact that you have and can have. Just a great little extra bonus coaching tip. So many gold nuggets in this episode. My final two questions. The next one is, what disruptive idea do you have that would change the coaching landscape in 2030?
Yeah, for me, having been a PE teacher and also coached into many sports, I would love to see, we call it here more cross-pollination of the sports. So I think all too often we're in our bubbles in sports, and could actually probably relate this to the workplace as well, that we get in these silos of how we do things. And quite often looking outside of that silo to other businesses or other sports. In particular, in sport, we've got things like Aussie rules football, soccer, basketball, netball, field hockey. All of those are what we call invasion sports. So a lot of the tactics or drills or skills, ideas, warm-up games can all be shared, and we can come up with such a great toolkit. So I think working more with others and looking outside of our little bubble really helps to create best practice. And it's sort of that also to just being open to think differently, which I think that in 2024, in business and in sport, with the nature of the challenges that face our world, you know, things that we haven't yet faced, things like the COVID pandemic, global warming, you know, there's quite a significant amount of wars going on around the place. We've got cost of living crisis everywhere, and they impact everything that we do in the workplace and in community sport. So we have to think differently. And I think all too often we just get caught in this same way of thinking, you know, the autopilot kicks in, and I'm a big believer that we have to keep learning and we have to keep in order, if we've learned sort of a lot of the people in our own workplace or our own business, then go outside, think bigger, and grab those like great ideas, because there's just so many brilliant minds around doing things differently. So picking up on those and building your own little toolkit, I think, will really help.
Two things came to mind. My nephew's circus school warm-up games, some of the best I've ever seen. So shout out to Preston Circus School. Highly recommend people just go and watch the circus. They do it so well collaboratively and teamwork, and older kids with the younger kids, and just so good. And also the other thing that came to mind is in October later this year, I'm actually doing exactly that. So I'm bringing 6 corporate companies together for a pickleball tournament, but I'm running a workshop in the morning on cross-pollination of different companies. So it's the first time I've done that, and you're 100% right. The future is innovation and engagement. So on that note, my final question I wanted to ask you, and it's something that you brought up again. I know we hadn't caught up for a while, so we did have a good off-air chat as well. But this thing around impacting at a higher level, whether it be on a board, getting women on a board to have an impact at a level where real sustainable change can happen, whether it be in sport or in the workplace. But why is that important in the future and now?
Through lived experience of this, it's sort of like no matter how much great work we can do in the community and in our clubs and in our workplaces, ultimately, if we don't have the backing and the support of the big decision makers in our organisation or in our sports club or in our leagues, then I don't want to say that work goes to waste, but the impact that it has on and the change that it has is quite minimal. So if we don't have, all these pieces of the puzzle, and during my time of being a PhD student, I sort of got exposed to how complex this problem is, that it's not just a click of the fingers, let's get more women and girls playing sport. It's impacted by every element of our daily lives. I talk to my daughter about when we go to the shops and we buy a birthday card for a 5-year-old. If you look at the types of birthday cards that are for girls versus boys, girls are pink, flowery, love hearts. They've got words on them like soft and lovely. The boys are all superheroes and cars and trucks and they're action things. So it's intertwined in our daily lives, and it's so complex that what I'm seeing here in Melbourne is there's so many people doing such great work, men and women, advocating for change and equality and really trying really hard on those sort of day-to-day tasks and leadership in the clubs and workplaces. But unless it sort of flows upwards, or and the decisions support what's going on, it just stops. It's really that in the theoretical lens, they talk about it as a glass ceiling, that there's great stuff going on in the lower sort of levels of everything, but until we see policy and structure and systematic change and support and funding, which is a huge one, where it's limited. And that, I think that's the bit that I'm starting to realise for me now, as we move into this era, this new sort of post-COVID era. I think the critical element has to be, we've done so much upskilling of women. And that's great, and let's keep that up. But it's now the men who support the women, and there's loads and loads of my time in sport and in business. I've had so many great men as advocates. We need to figure out how to empower them and give them the toolkit they believe in it and they support us, but how can they advocate to other men? So it's really pulling that other lever that I still think is a little bit untouched, and a little bit like there's a lot of side conversations that happen with men that say, I support you, this is great, we want to help. And they often say, how can we help? So it is about us now putting some effort in to think about building some toolkits, educating men, and to really advocate on women's behalf. And then also it's about us, often we hear of this concept, the pale, male, stale, sort of the other word that gets thrown around a lot here is dinosaurs. Well, those men that hold a lot of power in our sport and workplaces, and how do we bring them on the journey and get them to an open mindset, a growth mindset of learning and changing? And I think it comes back to the point we were just talking about of that best practice, cross-pollination, seeing who's doing it great, how have they done it, how do we get our communities working collaboratively to support everyone, not just women and girls. We know there's lots of other intersectionality of inclusion, but the greater that we can empower everyone to make the change, and it has to be everyone. It's not the women and girls issue is not just women and girls to solve. It's got to be everyone, because like I say, there's no point at just being this small, it's not even 50% of the population that don't hold a lot of the power positions. It has to be everyone working towards it.
Well, Jules Hay, everyone, you've heard it from her very passionate advocating voice to help all of us do a better job within our communities to create inclusive club environments with scaffolding in our daily coaching. Be mindful of your assumptions and your expectations. Make sure that we use we language to bring each other along with self-worth and confidence so that we can work together. It's been just, I could talk to you more and more and more, but, based on how long people listen to podcasts, we better wrap it up. But Jules Hay, you're a legend, and I please recommend just people reach out, get in touch, because she has so much to offer sport and the workplace. And I can't wait to continue to watch you step into your greatness as a coach, as a leader. And thank you for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Thanks, Emma. And thank you also for being such a great advocate of everything inclusion in sport. You're an awesome mentor, and I love chatting to you today.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.